Hey, it's Drybear. The developers just finished a very lengthy, over 2-hour broadcast going over what changes they're making after the holiday this week and beyond. So I'm going to do a recap of everything so you don't have to sit through the entire broadcast. The first note is that they're doing a patch this week, patch 0.1.1, and this will have a ton of really great stuff in it, and it's targeted on the low-hanging fruit, fixing problems, making adjustments, and we'll go through all of those in just a second. But just know that most of the pain points that are making the game unfun right now, they are targeting in this patch, and then there will be a future update where they'll go over balance changes, direction, economy, like larger game systems that they'll focus on a new patch. But this week they want to just rapid fire a whole bunch of things that will make the game better in the short term. The first thing to talk about is item filters on console. I'm tired of being people are shooting the messenger on this one. Every time I talk about item filters in general, everyone just gets really mad at me for having talked about it, even though it's not on console. So this week, they're implementing the system that exists in Path of Exile 1 for item filters. So it's not going to be a direct one-to-one, like you can open up the item filters in your console experience for Xbox or PlayStation and set them up. However, the way it works in Path of Exile 1, which is at least it's a functioning item filter, is you will be able to log in on the website, pathofexile.com, so you can't do this on your console. You'll have to grab a phone or a tablet or a computer or a laptop or whatever, log into the website, and you will be able to set your item filter for console on the website through your account. If you go to filterblade.xyz, I went over this yesterday, you'll be able to export directly to the website if you log in through Filterblade, set up your console, set up your filter, and then link it up that way. And this week with the update, whatever filter you have set on your website account will automatically be put into your console game. So at least you'll be able to use item filters on console. I know a lot of people want it to be in-game, it needs to be built in, whatever, but item filters will be online this week for consoles, so at least that's a huge win for people that play on console and are tired of the clutter. Next up is Endgame Mapping. They're doing a bunch of changes to the gameplay system. There's not like a whole lot of balance they're talking about for the characters, but they're going to do some really cool things around visibility, being able to see things on the ground, like some of the blood puddles going underneath grass, trees being in the way, certain explosive effects not being noticeable. They're doing an increase to chests, essences, loot, strong boxes, amount of monster count, pack size overall, and just by default making the endgame mapping experience more rewarding overall. In some cases maybe 10% better, and in some cases way more, just to make sure that the mapping experience is better overall. They're also adding in 4 new maps for the Lost Towers, so it's not just the same one from Act 2 over and over and over, which is going to be Alpine Ridge, Sinking Spire, Bluff, and Mesa, which you just saw on screen. So all those will be viable options for opening up a Lost Tower and climbing it to activate the Precursor option. You will have different options, and they're making adjustments to that as well. They're also going to be increasing the amount of bosses showing up on the map, which is a big reason why some people are struggling with having the what's called map viability, like being able to maintain having multiple maps, because as long as you actually have sustain on your waystones, you can get more and more of those. So there will be not only more bosses on the map, but there's also going to be a new Precursor tablet that you can put into the Lost Towers that will add bosses to the map as well, which is super huge. All of that's going to be making it into this patch this week. They're also just going to be making some changes to the VFX on some of things that come on your screen and melee options that come through. They're going to be making some improvements to the strong boxes, so they spawn faster and the smoke that comes out isn't as all-encompassing and harder to see. They're going to be making the Atlas zoom out, which is really big. This is a #1 thing for me. It feels like the Atlas is just super zoomed in, especially once you get into multiple biomes across the Atlas. It gets really hard to keep track of where you are when you're looking for multiple citadels. So this is the view of it. You'll be able to see the Atlas way more zoomed out in the new patch this week. And they're also going to be making it so you can see the biome that a map belongs to on the Atlas as well. For leagues, they're making some changes to they're called leagues because they're leagues from Path of Exile 1, but like Delirium, Ritual, Expedition, Breach, they're making some changes to all of those. They're making the Delirium spawns more consistent and fluid across the entirety of running across the Delirium, so it's not so weird. They're making it so the omens show up 60% more often in the shrines that you get for Ritual, and they're also making the shops better for the expeditions that you run and the vendors that you talk to. Next, they're making some very needed adjustments to the Pinnacle Content content, citadels, the final boss, Ubers, things like that. First, they're making the citadels spawn closer and also have this big beam of light that comes up so you know where the citadels are no matter what. And with this beam of light, I think a lot of people are going to realize that they may have just like hit the uprights and gone past a citadel without even realizing it. Some people spend a lot of time without finding them, even though there are a ton of them. Because they're so, inconsequential in how they appear, it's going to be a little bit harder to know where they are. So that beam is going to be there, and also they're going to spawn closer to the starting area. A bit of a controversial change, but they are going to make it so for the Arbiter of Ash specifically, you will have 6 respawn attempts by default in order to take him down, which means that when you first encounter him to try and take him down, if you can only be in the map once. You won't be able to go and change your build and come back in, but you will have the option to respawn and try again up to 6 times in the current setup, and then the harder versions of the Arbiter of Ash will have less and less respawns. It'll only be for the Arbiter of Ash initially, but they do say that they want to extend this feature to other Pinnacle bosses as they go along. The intention was not so that you would run into the boss, not know the mechanics, die, and then disappear forever, but they do want to make sure that you're not like adjusting your build every time, trying, adjusting over and over. Next are some awesome item changes coming along with some buffs to some underperforming items and some mod weighting changes, which are going to be really cool. But my favorite change of these all is this change here, being able to override a socketed item. They didn't show soul cores here, but they show runes. It does destroy the runes so that you don't actually get to keep it, but at least you can override it so it's not bricked forever if you want to change an item that's already socketed. They also will be making some buffs to some underperforming uniques, some of them very large in some cases if they just weren't used at all for anything, but you can see some of these new olds here on screen. So a lot of the uniques that didn't really get picked up for any reason are getting some pretty big buffs going into the patch this week. But also making some changes to key bosses that feel really, really hard to play against. They gave a couple of examples and said there's many more in the patch. Examples like Silverfist somersault forward. It does a lot less damage. Grenades being more visible with some of the arsonists that you face off against. Some of the meteor spawning liches have to be closer in range before they cast it so it's not off screen, yada yada. And some really cool stuff in the patch, like being able to see if your charm has any uses left in the bottom left corner. You can see it down there. So not only it'll show when it's active, like an actual timer that your charm activated, but also how many more uses it has based on the amount of charges that it has on the charm itself. And some targeted buffs to things that are just underperforming, like scavenger plating on the spirit gem side. Next, I'm just going to recap the very lengthy Q&A session where they just sat down, the two hosts, Darth Microtransactions and of course Ghazi, just sat down with the 2 directors on the project and just had to shoot the talk, just water cooler talk on what the game is. So I'm not going to go through everything that was covered. I'm just going to talk about the things that are more substantial, right? They talked a lot about, we could do that, maybe we can do this in the future, we'll take a look, that's possible. I'm going to leave all those off and just talk about more of the substantial, actually meat and potatoes of what they talked about, at least coming in the near term. The first thing to talk about is the admin account issue. There was a couple weeks ago, just before the holiday, an issue where people were wondering if there was a data breach at GGG because there were cases of people having items stolen from their account or some kind of weirdness going on with security, and people were wondering, is my account at risk, that sort of thing. So they did have a very honest reaction to this. What happened was one of their customer service members had a admin account tied to their Steam version of their Path of Exile 2 account, and the Steam side of that actually had a breach, which means that that specific admin account had been fraudulently accessed by a bad actor, and then they had access to some of the things that a customer service admin would have access to. And they had, a small period of time where they had access to things where they could actually go into people's accounts and steal items and things like that. They don't know the full extent of it yet, but they mentioned that it was very quickly closed out. All of the admin accounts had all of their things reset, and they're switching all admin accounts to 2-factor, but this wasn't a true data breach, right? They didn't get access to your credit card number. They didn't get access to, being able to log into your account specifically. They just had the ability to make edits to your character and things like that for a period of time. So there were people that logged into their account and all of a sudden all their items had been transferred off to another character, or they had some things changed, characters were deleted. That's just because that person had access to an admin account. There's no longer a data issue, but there was some really, unfortunate unfortunate things happened, and they'll put out an official post when they have the final numbers and the full investigation is done. But I just want to make sure people know about that. Then they talked about Magic Find in general, this idea of having increased rarity to find items on your character. This was a big thing for the community over the last couple weeks of whether it is a good thing for the game or not, and also the fact that unlike Path of Exile 1, Magic Find or increased rarity to find items is actually affecting the drop of currency, not just items themselves. So the rarity of currency and the quantity of currency gets affected. Generally, they said that it's probably not a major issue, but they'll keep monitoring it. So I wouldn't expect anything in the short term changes around, increased rarity to find items. I don't think that's going to have any changes in the short term based on what they said in the interview, but it's something that they are continuing to monitor. Next up is the content release cadence. Since a lot of people have been wondering, myself included, on what they're going to do. Are they going to release one act at a time? Are they going to release one class at a time? What are they planning to do? They didn't have a clear answer on this. They will have an upcoming update probably in the next couple weeks, like the next month or so. We will see maybe by the end of January or early February, they'll talk about how they're going to be releasing content. It sounded like they were on the fence about whether they wanted to wait and release Act 4, 5, and 6 together, or maybe do like a new reset for everybody where you can make new characters and then all of a sudden they add 2 or 3 classes at once versus not. There's definitely going to be some questions on that, on how that works, but they didn't give me definitive answers on whether they're going to be releasing Druid and then a month later they'll put, Huntress in the game or whatever. They just said that they are working on all that content. The new campaign acts are being done, the classes are being finalized, and they're deciding how to package that, and they'll have an update for us in the next couple weeks or next month or so. The next question was around Warrior and the state of balance on Warrior and maces and melee and slow animations in the first place. They acknowledged that Warrior does feel a little bit weaker compared to all the other classes in the game in the end game, and they need to get some more data on why that is the case. I hope they don't go the way of just making the Warrior faster, because then we're just very much on a slippery slope going back to Path of Exile 1. There are definitely a lot of solutions they could use that I've put forth in previous videos, but they said they don't have a solid solution on that yet. They're just going to see how things work out with the adding of the new classes, and potentially in the short term if anything needs to happen with the Warrior itself. And they will be making a pretty substantial buff to armor and how that functions, as well as scavenger plating in the new patch. They said that it's about a 15% buff for armor overall as a defensive mechanic going into the patch this week. So they're going to see how that affects warriors who are primarily, they have the easiest access to armor out of all the classes in the early access right now. So they're going to see how that 15% buff to armor applies to warrior, and they'll just take a step-by-step approach for it to see if they just continually add more options for warrior and if it gets better over time. Next, they talk about charms and the fact that charms feel undervalued right now, and they really are in some cases. Things like the anti-freezing charm or anti-stun charm still interrupts you when you first get stunned or frozen, which kind of defeats the purpose of the charm going off in the first place if you still get stutter stepped or broken out of your animation, even though you have immunity to that kind of CC. They mentioned that it does feel like you don't get enough charm slots in the current game, and they even talked about maybe even adding in additional charm slots to the unique belts, which have the fixed amount of slots on them already. So hopefully they felt like they're just generally not happy with where charms are, and they want to make them more visible, more powerful, and more impactful in future updates. They also talked about crafting feeling a little underwhelming. They don't want to go all the way of PoE 1, where oftentimes you don't care about really good drops on the ground that rolled well on their own, because you can just craft all the best items anyways. But they do recognize there are some people that are just not crafting at all, because it's better just to sell the things that you get off the ground and then use the currency for trading. So it's something that they will kind of be addressing in the future, and potentially even having more currency items drop. And they also talked about how in future content updates they want to add more crafting options. So maybe as we add more crafting options to the game, it starts to feel better overall, because the ones we have now, like you can do an AUG or a trans, you can regal it up to a yellow. Most people don't alch because there's too few of them. Then you run an exalt on it a bunch of times, or maybe you divine the stats if they're right, or you chaos it if there's missing stat on it overall. But they do say that they want to add in more options, like secondary options, mechanics, as well as different currencies that will be added to the game as well. Then in the final moments of the Q&A, they answer some very important questions. They will be working on an Atlas search function function. It's not in the works right now, so I wouldn't expect it in the next quarter, so the next 3 to 5 months probably not, but maybe later this year we will see an Atlas search function. They are going to make an adjustment to the Crow of Judgment, which is my affectionate name for the melee bird in the Trial of Chaos that has the crazy tornado. In the patch this week, there will be a nerf to the Crow of Judgment, so we will start, taking the lives of many exiles out there. They are going to make some adjustments to the appearance of rare and magic mobs and how they stand up to other mobs, but they said that they don't want to do a Fresnel glow over the top of it to make it feel a little bit too arcadey. They like it feeling kind of realistic. They will be allowing you to change the Venom Drought reward that you get from Act 3 when you do the Venom Crypt, so they'll add an option to be able to adjust that after you've made that choice. And the last thing that's super important is they are currently working on a map tab or a Waystone tab that you can add to your stash. So if you wanted to, you can come over here and you can actually have a tab for that, not just for gems or whatever. You can actually have a tab that is just for Waystones. So they are working on that as an option, and they'll kind of add that into a future update once it's ready to go. And that's the update for this week. Some really cool stuff. Loot filter on console, finally. Some nice nerfs to bosses. Some new things coming into the game that's going to make it feel a lot better live this week. And then we'll get future updates. And of course, stay tuned to my channel if you're looking for that. As soon as we know more about what's coming in the game, I'll be sure to keep you guys updated. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people. And don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.